the person who has never been interviewed, the guy that's just flipping tortillas, the guy that just works the fire, is as interesting or more than any big name in barbecue, because a lot of times they're doing more of the work, or they're figuring out even more. There's these people that, I've sat down with people who know thermodynamics and science and all of these high level things. And then they talk to some guy who just figured it out, and they know the same stuff, but one can say it in math and the other one is just like, no, you just do this because that's how it works. And it's like, it's beautiful to see how the human brain can kind of decode these high level things just from hard work.
On the 55th episode of Passion in Progress, host of the best barbecue show, Yoni Levin. If I were to use one word to describe Yoni, it's in the shirt that he sells from his merch store, and it's #MeatMan. Yoni has done over 100 podcasts where he's interviewed some of the top pitmasters in barbecue from around the world. If you know a lot about barbecue, or if you are curious about the art of barbecue, this is the episode for you. But before we begin, I just want to take a second to thank all my patrons that support me and what I do in this podcast on Patreon. If you would like to support me in that way, I'm at patreon.com/Javier Mercedes. I also do have merchandise now. I have the Passion in Progress mug. You can pick up one of those snazzy fresh mugs from my website, javiermercedes.com. But now it's time to talk about the community, the process, the pitmasters, and obviously the star of the show, the meat. All of that and more on the 55th episode of Passion in Progress with Yoni Levin. What is up, Mercedes? Javier Mercedes here for yet again another Passion in Progress show where we talk to inspiring individuals, and hopefully through hearing their stories, you too are motivated to go out and pursue your passions. And today on the show, we do have somebody that is in pursuit of barbecue.
Hell yeah.
And we are in the mecca of it here in Texas. Yoni Levin, how's it going, man?
That's great. We are in the mecca. We're in the capital of Texas barbecue right here.
You host the best barbecue show.
Exactly.
Podcast. Go ahead and give what you do on the show, who you interact with, and I just like your hustle for going around and interviewing all of these amazing people in the craft of barbecue.
I started cooking barbecue when I was like 19 or 20. And I say that loosely because barbecue is not really what it was. It was just kind of crappy backyard smoked meats. And I was soaking wood chips and doing all kinds of things that were just kind of a mess. And over time, I started realizing, there's different methods, there's different ways. I started using a Weber grill and doing a bunch of different kind of home backyard tricks. And then in 2008, I moved here. In 2009, Franklin opened, and I had some of that, and it was incredible. And then La Barbecue actually opened around the corner from my house. And so my pursuit of barbecue kind of came to me almost as soon as I got to Austin. And I've been eating barbecue, cooking, picking their brains, trying to learn myself. A few years ago, I met up with some guys who wanted to start a marketing company.
He just did air quotes for those that can't see.
And we started a show, and they've kind of given up on the marketing thing. But now I have a show all about barbecue, and I go all around the country and the world, hopefully, to talk about why people cook over fire.
One of the quotes that I love, you said in one of your episodes, is barbecue is hard work. People that do barbecue tend to like hard work. Can you talk about what that means to you?
I tell the guys, I call it the best barbecue show, and it's a little tongue in cheek because I purposely don't do lists. I think if you want a list, there's a million guys doing it. There's a bunch of people trying to take this giant world of people cooking all different ways and turn it into the top 10 or top 20 or top 50. And I wanted to tell the story. I wanted to show up kind of like you with microphones and cameras and just say, hey, tell me, why do you stay up for 16 hours straight cooking? And I love that idea. And I wanted to put as much work into the show as people put into cooking the food.
The more you delve deep into your episodes of your podcast, the more you can get a sense of the community. And just talk to me about what that is like. Showing up to events, showing up to somebody's restaurant, or whatever that may be. Talk to me about the community behind barbecue.
#barbecue fam. It's incredible. In a world where people want to start fights on the internet, who want to talk down about each other, who want to kill each other, trying to drive to work, there are people taking their time, being generous. I mean, people are blown away. I was just in LA for the LA Food Bowl, And I walked in, and there's Aaron Franklin and Burt Bachman, Billy Durney and Sam Jones, and they all shared this very small space, but there's 5 smokers and a 25-foot rib pit and a giant whole hogging pit. And one of the people from LA was like, how did you guys decide? Like, you didn't fight over who got the best spot? And at no point was it, everyone was just like, no, we're just sharing.
Can you explain, just for the people that don't know, the names that you just said?
Okay. So Sam Jones is a world famous whole hogging guy. He has a book out. He's on Vice. He's on all these channels, literally just cooking whole hogs in North Carolina, in a town that's got about 5,000 people in it. Aaron Franklin created what I would call the modern brisket. He took these old methods and really dumbed them down to simple salt and pepper, slow smoke, and just watching a piece of meat until it's that perfect mix between kind of like cooked but relaxed. And it creates this beautiful slice with rendered fat. And I mean, people wait in line for 3 or 4 hours to get into his restaurant.
These are the creme de la creme.
Yeah.
These are the top-notch people that you're talking about, and they're all sharing their space. One of the things that I found interesting about talking about your podcast with the other people when you get them on is they're like, yeah, I love listening to your podcast. And it's more in terms of everybody that you have on your show. They love barbecue to the point that they're in the act of barbecuing, but they also want to listen to a show about barbecuing at the same time. Can you talk about the act of practicing barbecuing and why that's different from some other methods of cooking?
Well, if you were going to cook a steak or something, you can cook 20 steaks in a night and practice your recipe. Mm-hmm. When you want to practice cooking a brisket, when you want to practice barbecue, you're in it for 10, 12, 14 hours. And let's say you want to try it with a little more salt, or you want to try it a little hotter or colder. You can only change one thing. So for 16 hours, you can make one change, and then you have to see how that comes out. And then the next day, you can try something different. And the idea...
That's crazy.
So the idea is that it takes a lot of work just to get to the point where you feel happy with what you're doing. And then on top of that, these guys are doing 100 briskets in a day. So they're cooking 3, 4, 5,000 gallon pits full of barbecue, and they have to make sure that everything's going to come out the right way. If it's not going good in the first 6 or 8 hours, you better figure it out, because there's going to be people there at 11 a.m.
Oh my gosh. Have you ever heard of a story where somebody just batched like 100 pieces of meat?
Not usually 100. They can usually bring it back. But yeah, there's guys that when they first opened their restaurants, they were sleeping in the pit room. There's a guy in San Antonio, Esal Ramos, and his partner Joe. They run 2M Smokehouse, and they literally were sleeping in their pit room. And the business next door was a mattress shop, and they realized they were sleeping there and gave them a mattress to sleep on. And they were just full on sleeping in there. But so they were supposed to do shifts. And sure enough, one of them was finishing his shift, sat down, fell asleep. And they wake up, and there's 3 or 4 hours before service, and like the fire's dead, the briskets are too cold, like this whole thing where they had to, they were literally finished everything at like 10:55.
Jeez. Let's get into that then. What goes into, why is it such an arduous process? Like, why does it take so long to do this? And from what you were saying, like using the scientific method, if you want to try something different, you can only change one thing, and then you have to wait so long to reap the benefits. Talk about the process.
Well, I'll start with brisket, because brisket is king in Texas, and you're gonna want to do a few things. First, you're gonna want to cool it down so that you can trim it, because most briskets don't come kind of in the shape you want.
Just for real high level, what part of the animal is brisket?
Brisket is kind of the peck. There's only 2 briskets per cow. Mm-hmm. And so there's a left and a right, and that's it. So a place that serves 100 briskets, that's 50 cows.
Dang. All right, but continue.
So you want to trim the brisket when it's cold, but then you want to season it and let it kind of get to a more room temperature, so that when you put it on the pit, it's not shocked. And then all you're doing is watching a fire. You're kind of crisscrossing logs, post oak, something that's really dry but hardwood, so it burns good. And you're just letting the smoke kind of slowly kiss it. Some people start at a low temperature and go up. Some people start at a higher temperature and go down. We could spend an hour just talking about methods, but over hours, you're letting the smoke pass over convect heat and flavor into the meat. And that's why you get that nice dark bark around the outside, that salt and pepper, that kind of black covering. But what that's doing is it's holding in all this heat. And there's a few challenges, but the biggest one is called the stall. And what happens is literally once the brisket reaches a certain temperature, it starts to sweat, and the sweat cools it down. And you have to keep cooking it so that you can offset the sweating until it reaches, you know when you look at like boiling water, it like levels off at a temperature. Yeah. So you'll be cooking a brisket and it'll just level off and it won't get 1 degree hotter for an hour sometimes. And you just have to fight through that and keep cooking until it goes the rest of the way up. And you're cooking to over 200 degrees. In a steak or something like that, you're doing this 160, 150, 130. You're actually almost overcooking it. But what you're really doing is you're just liquefying everything inside and then waiting for that to kind of all get really, really tight. And then right when it relaxes is when the brisket's done. Usually let it rest and kind of soak all the juices back in. And then when you take a slice, you'll see just the fat and the muscle and everything just melts in your mouth.
It's like a video game. like I didn't know that, and especially what you're talking about, that little sweating part. It's like that's the boss level.
Yeah, for sure.
From my standpoint, listening to the pod, because I've never done barbecue before. I love cooking, and from what it sounded like, the process, one of the arts is just how you control fire and how that doesn't affect, if you have a normal oven, you can control the temperature, but with pits, you can't, the art of cooking is also the moving, like what you were saying, moving the logs and controlling of the fire. Can you talk about that?
When you put a bunch of wood in this box, I mean, you're really just working with a series of tubes. Mm-hmm. It's just one big tube with a little tube with fire in it, and then a tube to let the fire out. And so the thermodynamics, you might get into the math of it, but the idea is that these tubes are going to send the smoke in a certain direction. And some people say they get theirs to swirl, or some people put the firebox higher or the smokestack. One of the things you'll see now is a lot of the pits, they're old propane tanks. Mm-hmm. And so they go anywhere from 100 to 1,000 gallons, and they kind of round out on the end. And some people just put a smokestack right off of it. Aaron Franklin and a lot of these guys, they put this kind of triangle. They call it a smoke catch. But the idea is that you want the smoke to travel over the briskets long enough to give them some flavor, but not long enough for like stuff to stick to it, for that creosote, that kind of sourness. Mm-hmm. You're literally you want the smoke to kiss it and then get the hell out. So people have higher smokestacks. People have different doors and ventilation systems. And even though it's the simplest of cooking methods, a lot of people are complicating it depending on how they want to do it. A lot of people, so usually there's a pit in the middle, fire, and a stack to let it out. But there's also these guys making reverse ones where the stack and the fire are on the same side, and the smoke actually goes under and then around and back through.
So it kind of goes double.
Well, it's kind of heating underneath, but then the smoke's traveling back over. And there's a guy in Lubbock, Evie Mays, his name's Arnis, and he makes some of the coolest, it's just this giant kind of rusty tube that he drives around, but then he cooks better brisket than the average person in Texas.
Talk about pits. What is that in the community of barbecue?
So barbecue actually started as a butcher's trying to take some meat that was going bad, or meat that was about to go bad. It's kind of like the rotisserie chickens at the grocery store.
Yeah.
They were going to cook these briskets because they hadn't sold them all. And they smoked them, and then they served them. You could take it to go, you could eat it there, but there's just like a couple tables. And at some point, I'm not sure when, somewhere in the 80s maybe, it flipped where people cared more about the barbecue than the actual meat market. So the smoke and all that was so enticing that people stuck around for that, and they became restaurants rather than butcher shops or meat markets. And you can go, there's a few places in Austin that still have them. They actually are so old that they're grandfathered in because they're kind of illegal pits, but they're giant stone pits that open on the top. You can see them in Lockhart too, but there's a couple places in Austin that have them. Or if you go up to Taylor, there's a place called Louis Miller Barbecue, and Wayne Miller, who's kind of a fourth generation barbecue guy. He's the kind of guy that I'll go there. We talk for 3 hours. We do a 90-minute podcast, and then we probably talk for 3 more hours. He's got 3-story ceilings with this giant stone. They call it the Cathedral of Smoke because he's literally got this giant stone pillar that lets all the smoke out, and he's got all these big brick pits, and it's the most Instagrammable. Like, it's better than the FOMO factory.
Fast forwarding to today, are there people that are specifically making pits for the enthusiast, consumer, prosumer, pro? What's that look like?
You can spend $30,000-$40,000 on a big pit if you have a professional restaurant now. There's guys that are doing really nice welds, perfect doors that seal. There's 4 or 5 companies right now that's actually really funny because we're talking about this. And right now there's a guy that's kind of old school that started a bunch of beef on Facebook from one of the newer guys because he's like, you stole my pit designs.
No,
like,
really? It's gotten to that point.
Well, that's what I'm saying is it's funny to me because it's literally just a tube connected to a tube. So it's not rocket science. Like there's not a lot of secrets. I mean, there's little things that make this work better, but you'd figure that out. That's kind of what the secret of barbecue is that's why no one's afraid to give away. If you go to Franklin and ask them a few questions, they're not going to be like, we can't tell you, it's a secret. Like, it's not in Texas. Everyone's like, sure, yeah. What do you want to know? Yeah, we do this. Because they know, one, you're never going to do half the work they did to get there. And that's how you, like, even if I told you all of Aaron Franklin's secrets right now, it wouldn't matter because you would have to do 99% of the work to get that 1% right.
Mm-hmm. He just came out with a masterclass too. That's how much he's just like, look, I'll teach you. I'll show you what it's like.
Well, and I think he's kind of preempting because he made the book and the book's really good, but I know that there's things that they do that aren't in the book. And so now I'm pretty sure I haven't watched the whole masterclass, but from what I've been hearing, there's a few of those little secrets. There's a few things that aren't in anywhere else that every pitmaster does that they don't really talk about, that Aaron's just like, well, screw it. The word's starting to get out. I'm just going to make a masterclass and like tell everyone and be the source.
Mm-hmm.
But he is. I mean, he's the guy that most of these barbecue places wouldn't be here if he hadn't, charged more for brisket than anyone ever has and cooked it better than anyone ever has.
Speaking of charging more, it sounds like the cost of meat itself is going up. Can you talk about what that means for a pitmaster?
It's just it cuts into their margins. In Austin, in LA, where it's starting to pop up, in New York, it's not as big of a deal because people, when you see the picture on your phone, when you watch the YouTube video of someone slicing a brisket, you want that. And maybe you just don't buy as much. Maybe instead of getting a pound, you get a half a pound, but the prices are going up. Not a lot, but 50 cents to $1 here and there per pound. And it has to, because the demand for brisket, there's people in China, Japan, Europe that are buying, they want certified Angus, black Angus, American beef, and they're shipping it all over there. The demand for brisket is insane. You could, if you start a farm right now, you will sell every cow you have in 2 or 3 years when they're ready.
It's global now. When you started your podcast, I'm assuming most of it was here in Austin, but you're traveling all over. How have you seen different, and is it called Pitmaster? Because there's a difference. So actually, let's get into that. Is there a difference between a chef and a pitmaster? You're smiling like, I don't know if I want to like really get political about this. Like, can you talk about it.
It's the same thing. There's a level of humbleness because a lot of these people just read a few books and started cooking. So they're not a classically trained chef. They're not, a lot of them learned at someone else's place and just opened their own restaurant. So there are now chefs getting into it, and there are people like Billy Durney. He's world famous for actually learning in Texas, and he has a place in Red Hook called Hometown Barbecue. Mm-hmm. And just, of course, big, sweet, super nice dude. He used to work security for super famous people, Mary Kate and Ashley Olsen, and just retired from that and decided to cook barbecue, fell in love with it. What was the question? I got lost there.
So going around meeting other people, that was the first part, but then we switched it to pitmaster versus right. Chef.
So Billy Durney, they don't say pitmaster in his restaurant at all. They say pit guy, pit cook, pit whatever, but they don't like the word master. And there's starting to become these delineations of, well, I'm a chef, I'm a cook. Most people just want to say they're cooks. There are chefs now who cook barbecue and they don't want to be called chef because they feel like that's in a kitchen. But I personally don't care. I just call people whatever they want to be called. I think that names are stupid and that we all know you're good at something. So what is it? Like chef just is chief. That just means boss. Like it doesn't really, calling someone a chef, like if you're calling them a Michelin star chef or giving them some highfalutin name, yeah. But if you just call someone chef, like I think the pit masters or pit guys or chefs. I mean, these guys work. There's a guy who works in Houston, and one of his videos from when he worked in Austin is now at like 500,000 views. And it's not the most perfectly shot, great camera. It's just him going, hey, I'm about to cook for 12 hours. Come join me. And just showing this giant pit with 4 doors that's twice as long as this room, just filling it up with meat, cooking it all, and emptying it out.
Is that video 12 hours long?
No.
Oh, so he cut it down. I thought this was like, come join the live feed of me not watching paint dry, but watching meat cook.
Listen, barbecue is in the dark ages as far as technology. So any kind of live stream, anything like that, I guarantee you, you can see the statistics on YouTube. There would be 100% on there. It wouldn't be everybody, but someone would watch 100% of that video.
Just to get the little I'm trying to think of the word
intricacies.
Thank you, intricacies. I love leaving that kind of stuff in the podcast because I'm not perfect, people.
I was really impressed. There was one where you spilled like a cup of coffee, like right in the first 10 seconds.
Yeah. But let's get back to the first part of that question before the pitmaster versus chef. I think one of the terms that was used on one of your podcasts was the homogenization, or however that's pronounced.
Homogenization?
I'm really spreading myself, people, here with my vocab, okay? From people going from different place to different place, and you were just talking about in the dark ages. With the internet now, people are sharing what they have learned. How have you seen different parts of barbecue pop up in meeting different people from different regions? Is there a specific thing where it's like, nah, that's Texas, that's Tennessee. If you go up to New York, this person moved from Texas to New York, but it's like now it has a New York flavor, that kind of thing. What is that like?
In general, I'm not a purist. There's people, I do a lot of those Instagram, like ask me a question. And a lot of people are like, sauce or no sauce. And to me, that's not, there's no sauce or no sauce.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah.
I would try it with both.
there's places out in the country that still don't give you, they won't give you a fork. They're like, no forks, no sauce. Just here's a platter. You got fingers, right? I'm not really a purist in that sense of the term, but I am a purist in Texas barbecue, which really just means simple, slow smoke. That's how Texas differentiates itself from the rest of the world. If you look at South Carolina or St. Louis or Kansas City, it's very hot. So whereas we're cooking 250 to 300, they're cooking 300 to 500. And they're doing it quicker. So where we would cook a brisket in 12 hours, they'll cook it in 6 or 7. And it's not bad, but I just think Texas barbecue is better.
He's like, I'm not going to say that it's bad, but I'm going to be like, this is better.
Well, we all know the best thing is the slow food. Barbecue is this whole slow food movement, the things that are taking over cities all over. Barbecue is the ultimate. It's like the strongman competition of slow food, because no one wants, even when I do it, I get so excited. I buy a brisket, I trim it, I put it in the fridge, and then I wake up the next day and I'm like, okay, 12 hours. Step 1, salt and pepper. Like
crazy.
You have to realize, and then you think about, there's guys that spend all day trimming just so they can spend all day the next day cooking. I mean, like this isn't an army of people. When you talk about cooking 100 briskets, there's probably only 2 or 3 people that trimmed them, and there's only 2 or 3 people cooking them. So if you think about, you take a 10 or 12, sometimes 15, 20 pound piece of meat, and you've got to move 50 of those every hour. You figure out where the hot spots are, your pits. And so there's all kinds of rotation. Sometimes people, the brisket kind of has a big fat part, and then it kind of it slims down. And that slim part, you have to be careful because it's really easy for that to burn and curl up and lose its moisture. So there's a constant watching everything, but at the same time, you don't want to open your pit too much because they say if you're looking, you ain't cooking. So
whoa, man.
when you open the pit, you're letting the heat out, you're letting the smoke out. So you have to, whatever you need to do, if you need to rotate 50 briskets, you got to do that in 10 or 15 minutes, or else the whole pit's going to cool off, and then you go and you put a log in the fire, and you're trying to get it hot again, and then it goes 20, 30, 50 degrees too hot, and then you have to kind of shut off some air, and it's trying to keep this constant. It's kind of like meditating. Like you have to kind of stay at a balanced level, because as soon as you get a little off, you can really easily overcompensate, and then all of a sudden you're doing this.
Yeah,
and you're not.
He's making a sine wave for those that can't see.
I'm waving my arms around.
Yeah, an equilibrium or like that sweet spot. A lot of the people that you interview, they're so passionate about it. And each day, it's not a mundane task because every single cook is something different. Especially, it sounds like if they're cooking outside because you can't control the elements. One of the things that I loved about when I was working at the Chive, we did a piece when Hurricane Harvey came down. And the cool thing was with barbecue, you didn't need electricity. So when natural disasters happen, you can bring out the, would it be pits?
Everything,
you can bring out your smoker. You don't need electricity to cook. The only problem is you need refrigeration. So people bring like refrigeration trucks and things of that nature. There's a couple episodes that you had where it was for like disaster relief stuff. Can you talk about the different pitmasters, chefs, whatever you want to call them, you've interacted with in that capacity?
Well, so like this one touches my heart because Operation Barbecue Relief is now a giant organization that goes running towards any disaster. And since the show started, I think they had a few 100,000 meals served. It started in Joplin, Mississippi from the tornadoes. Mm-hmm. And since then, like less than 3 years, they're at over 3 million meals served.
How about that?
So they will literally show up to a crisis, whatever, and they have this kind of magical system where they have an app and it's guys that run companies, but they love barbecue. So they took their genius in running companies and turned it into this barbecue relief organization. So 1,000 volunteers get called, and when they land, they know exactly where they need to be. They know exactly what they need to be doing because this isn't a restaurant. This makes a restaurant look like a joke. They're getting a pallet of tomato sauce and they have to figure out how to open all the cans. Like they have insane problems.
Just to touch on this, when I went down to help with Hurricane Harvey, we were with Triple H. I don't know if you've heard of them, but they're another disaster relief, but I'm assuming they encounter the same exact problems. And one of the weirdest things that you don't think about is sharp knives. Like, you have to cut a whole bunch of meat for a whole bunch of people. And like you were just saying, how to get a can open and everything. When a disaster happens, you can't just go down the street to such and such, like the mart and get a tool that you need. But it's really cool that because of the amount of food that you're cooking and the way that it's cooked, you can just get a whole bunch of people together and be like, look, what you do is you just sit there and you cut this thing and then you package that. And then especially for sandwiches, which we can get into for barbecue, it's just easier you're the bread guy. You literally you open this up, you put 2 pieces of bread and move it along. I did hear on one of your episodes, going back to the sandwiches, was it you that said, or somebody else that said that anything can be a sandwich?
I was just talking to someone about this and I can't remember which episode that was. But I brought it up a few times since. And yeah, at one point someone said pie is a sandwich, like changed my mind. Kind of going back to the whole Operation Barbecue Relief. The cool thing is that they do have some Texas pitmasters, but a lot of the people who do that are competition guys. And so while Texas is doing its own thing, and there's still competition in Texas too, there's this whole world of competition where these guys have a whole rig already. They've got a cooker, they've got a kitchen on wheels. So it's really easy for Operation Barbecue Relief to just call them because they're stocked and ready to go. And all they have to do is show up and they give them, Tyson gave away, I think 10 pallets of chicken for one of the reliefs. Like it's just like you said, there's so much going on that you literally just show up and you do one thing because you have to do that one thing all day just to keep the train going.
Yeah. The podcast in general, how has it been? You are over 100 episodes. What's the journey been like from beginning to now? Yeah,
I mean, you're halfway there. You're at like 50 something now, right?
Yeah.
It's really just showing up and doing it now. At first, there was a little problem. I had a lot of contacts in the barbecue world already. I was already going to places every day and meeting pitmasters and buying them beers and just I was already in the community, so it was easy for me to say, "Oh, hey, be on my show." And I thought that we were going to do 50 episodes about the top 50 Texas Monthly list. And I still haven't covered that list after over 100 episodes because I realize there's a story and I like to chase it. Whether I have to go to LA or Tyler, Texas or Fort Worth, I'm just constantly chasing. There's a bunch of young guys who all quit where they were working to open up their own place. And it's hilarious because one of them teaches classes on how to cook barbecue. And it's great. I mean, if you go do that, you're going to learn crazy amounts of stuff. You're going to be 10 times better at cooking. But a few of them kept getting calls from these other guys who were trying to open a restaurant, and they were hitting me up because they were like, hey, can you help me like price, or tell me like what's the cost, or how much money am I going to make off each brisket? And I'm like, why are you calling those guys? They haven't even opened their restaurant yet. Like, these guys work in pits. They're figuring it out, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just laughing because we just called each other. Like there's not this professional or there's not these restrictions that you see in other industries. You can literally just call up the guy, hey, how do you do this? Or, you know, they might not always give you an answer, but most people in the barbecue community are super accessible. It's something I like to say, but I'm also afraid to say it at the same time because I don't want people to realize you can just like walk into the pit room and hang out with everybody. But it's true. At 90% of these places, you can just walk into the pit room, introduce yourself, and spend 20 minutes learning, watching, you know, holding the shovel, and the amount of love and welcoming, you know, when I said #barbecue fam, like, it's true. And because these people sit and stare at fire all day, they're just more grounded. They're not afraid, or the only people that are really hard to talk to or hard to get to are people like Aaron Franklin, who are just so famous, but the rest of them are super accessible. You can walk into any place. I mean, half the places in Austin now, they have a big sign, ask us about our pit tours. And it's not some fancy, like, you don't get like a docent to walk around and tell you the history. It's just some guy who's like, hey, here's what you want. I'll open the pit for you. And everyone grabs our phone, and, you know, you get that Instagram shot of all those briskets kind of slowly sizzling with that nice bark. I want to eat now.
It sounds like it adds to the story, and what you're talking about is this overall encompassing story of what barbecue is in not only Texas, but the US, which is, I think, really cool. And diving deep into your podcast, I get a lot of that, where just from episode to episode, each person is different. And getting to a specific place, talk to me about Snow's, because I know it's special to you in your barbecue journey here in Texas.
So in 2016, I think, maybe 2017, I saw this video that Yeti made. Yeti is amazing because they're just going around following enthusiasts, meeting them, and just finding these cool stories. So at Snow's, there's a woman named Tootsie. She grew up farming. She rode a horse to the bus stop to school every day. And she is now 83 years old, about to turn 84. And she cooks barbecue every Saturday. It's a tradition there to only be open on Saturdays, because the meat market, or the cow sales, I don't know what to call it, the auction. Mm-hmm. So you're literally, if you're standing at Snow's, you can hear all the cows kind of in pens waiting to get walked through the auction and sold. And while you're standing there, you'll see big trucks full of, you know, trailers full of cows going for ranchers to sell their cows. So this whole town kind of grew around this Saturday event where there's a little breakfast place and there's Snow's. And so it's only open once a week. And as soon as I saw that Yeti video, I was like, we have to go here. I want to meet this lady. I want to check it out. And so I'm one of those people who, like, now I'm more about exploring by myself. But back then I was like, we got to go together. Like, I can't go there by myself and eat this giant platter of barbecue by myself. It's weird. So I got a bunch of friends together, and I went, and I just had an amazing time. I was just blown away. And I hung out there. They were literally like, dude, we got to go. Like, it's an hour back to Austin. Like, we got to go. And so I went back a few weeks later, and then I started going back every week. And I've probably spent 300 or 400 hours in that line just waiting. And it just became this thing where I didn't even realize it was such a big deal. Like, I saw the video, and I love eating their food. And after about 10 or 15 times, Clay, who's one of the pitmasters, he was like, hey, how many times you been here now? You come every Saturday? And I was like, yeah, maybe. I like it. I grew up in upstate New York, and it was very common to get the hell out of town every weekend. And so it's not as popular here. And getting out of town, like Lexington, there's not really much around there. Giddings, Elgin, you know, you go in all these directions. You got to go almost an hour to get to anything outside of Austin. And
Texas is a big state.
It's huge. I just started going. And then after about a year or so of that, one of the young ladies who worked there just came up to me. She's like, get the hell out of the line.
Really?
And I just became a regular. So now I'm like a local there. And
So you can just show up now, and then they're just like, hey,
Yeah.
like you have spent enough money here.
and it's great. It's like family. You know, I go out there and Miss Tootsie's always got something funny to say. Kerry and his family, he's the owner, and a lot of his family work there. So it's just fun to see them all, you know. You can tell when service is starting to run out because they all kind of start talking to each other more, and like the mom or the dad or someone will crack open a beer, and then everyone starts to relax. And it's cool because if you stay there long enough, you just end up hanging out, and they'll stay there for an hour or two after they're done just to kind of talk to the locals, and we'll all be kind of picking off like one last brisket or whatever's left over. And it's really, it's like a family, you know. When you are in the barbecue community, you've got family all over the world. You just, as soon as they realize you're a barbecue person, there's no question.
Do you have any more examples of that? Other pitmasters talking to other pitmasters, or other people that want to learn about the craft?
I go to these events and I go through the whole rigmarole, and I get a media pass, and I do an application, and I give them a press kit and all this stuff. And most of the time I get there early, and someone just gives me like a Pitmaster wristband or an all access pass anyways. So it's one of those things where I know everyone now. So when I go, like I just went to Red Dirt, and it was like, everyone's like, oh, do you need a pass? Do you need a pass? And I was like, well, no, I have one, but yeah, I'm going to take one of the Pitmaster ones because that gives me even more access. You know, we were using the honey wagon, which is like a nice bathroom. We're using the honey wagon for like the artists at the stage because that area wasn't cordoned off. And of course the artists aren't going to show up a day before they're going on. So we had these like nice bathrooms and all this stuff. And then as soon as the like headliners showed up, they closed off all the bathroom stuff. But it's like, when you go to a barbecue event in general, there's usually a bunch of booths or tents or whatever, and you kind of walk along the front and you get to try something from each thing. I'm the guy in the back that's like sticking my hand in the pot and talking to everyone behind. And I like that because you get the person who has never been interviewed, the guy that's just flipping tortillas, the guy that just works the fire, is as interesting or more than any big name in barbecue, because a lot of times they're doing more of the work, or they're figuring out even more. There's these people that, you know, I've sat down with people who know thermodynamics and science and all of these high level things. And then they talk to some guy who just figured it out, and they know the same stuff, but one can say it in math and the other one is just like, no, you just do this because that's how it works. And it's like, it's beautiful to see how the human brain can kind of decode these high level things just from hard work.
Do you have any examples of that where, like, say the tortilla flipping, like, well, if you see it like crisping at a certain point, or it could be something with the meat. Does anything come to mind?
Well, so the best places, Valentina's in South Austin on Manchac, they have some of the best tortillas ever. Veracruz, which is more of a taco place, but they have handmade tortillas. They're at Radio, where we met up the other day.
Mm-hmm.
They will actually change the recipe depending on the humidity.
What? That is dedication.
So they know, they're just like, oh, it's a little more humid. Now for barbecue, it's great. The more humid, the better. Because some people will actually put a big pan of water in the pit just to get more humidity flowing through there. And in Texas, you never know. It might be a dry day. It might be, you know, from being here, like it might be 110 and dry, or it might be 90 and 100% humidity. But those humid days are the best for cooking barbecue because the air going into the smoker is more humid. You will find once you've cooked over time that on a humid day, you can literally take like an hour off your cook.
Oh, really? So it's more efficient in terms of cooking it faster.
Well, so for example, that if you think about, let's say you go for a run on a hot, dry day, you're kind of, everything's evaporating all the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you almost feel cooler.
Yeah.
But on a humid day, you're just soaked.
Mm-hmm.
And so for brisket, that's good. Remember I was talking about the stall and how it sweats? Mm-hmm. When it's humid, there's nowhere for that sweat to go. So that heat stays there. But when it's dry, that moisture comes off the brisket, and then that's taking heat with it. And that little bit of heat coming off, it's the same way you cool off by sweating.
Yeah.
But when the humidity's there, it just sticks and it has to just keep cooking.
So don't open up a barbecue joint in the middle of a desert, is what you're saying.
You can. You just want to have a lot of moisture going through that pit, whether it's a water pan. People do like a apple cider vinegar spritz. Some people will actually use different fats and try to reintroduce them into the brisket, whether it's through a spray or literally just like rubbing butter. I mean, it's not a very Texas thing. I think it's funny because so many people want to know the secrets now that a lot of guys on my podcast, if you listen to not the last one, but the one before, it's the Goldies guys. They're opening up in Fort Worth. They're the young guys that have all worked at places and kind of came together. But we had a really good time just because I know people take sound bites and things and people listen for tricks. And we were just like, yeah, first you rub the whole brisket in mayonnaise. And like, we just made up all these things just to mess with people. But you can tell it's all in jest. But there are people that they will do that in competition, especially. You see these weird, they will inject the briskets with these giant, looks like 20 fingers, but they're all needles, and they'll pump flavors and MSG and all this stuff, because in competition, you're not cooking the whole brisket for the whole brisket. You're cooking the whole brisket to get 5 or 6 slices out of the best part. And then a judge is just going to eat one bite. And you want so much flavor in that one bite that you basically render the whole thing inedible. I think it's a waste of meat, honestly.
Oh, so people don't eat the rest of the meat?
Well, so when let's say you go to a competition, right? And you want to submit brisket.
Yeah.
It's the opposite to me of what real good barbecue is, which is you just cook the whole thing. You try to make the whole brisket great and delicious and simple. When you see competition brisket, they cook the whole brisket, and then they're going to make these perfect little 6 slices, and they put it in a little clamshell to-go box with like a little garnish, and it has to be perfect slices, and there has to be a red ring around the outside. Like, it's this whole, I don't know how we got to it, but it's so far from, like, if I gave you a piece of competition brisket, you'd be like, I don't want this.
Really?
It's like, it tastes like sugar. It tastes like all the stuff they pumped into it and rubbed all over it. And the brisket's like the wrong color in the end. It's all red or kind of like almost purple sometimes. Whereas Texas barbecues, you're tasting just the salt and the pepper and maybe a few other secret spices on the outside. And you're just tasting the way they rendered the fat. You have to do a good job of cooking. Whereas I feel like in competition, you just have to do it's not even you have to do an insane job of seasoning, because you've got a person, let's say we were judging competition, they're going to put 10, 20, 30 things of brisket in front of us, and we have to try a bite of each one and decide which one's the best. So your food might go in front of 100 people in a day. It just doesn't make sense to me. I used to cover a lot of competition, and I still will a little bit, but the events where everyone's just cooking and hanging out are way more appealing to me.
Yeah, because then you get the 12 hours, like what you were just saying, 3 hours show up, and then the 90-minute podcast, and then 3 hours more of talking.
Well, and it's great because I can go around, and usually people aren't on the same. Some people like to cook their briskets the day before and then let them sit, and they have what's called a warmer, an Alta-Sham. There's a bunch of different names for them, but it keeps the perfect humidity and temperature. And what you're doing is, by holding that brisket for 6-8 hours, you're actually giving it more time to kind of, when you take something and cook it, it gets really tense, right? Like if I put a lighter near you, you tense up. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing happens to the meat. It tenses up and then it relaxes. But if you cut it right when it relaxes, all the juice and everything will pour out. Mm-hmm. So you almost wait for the meat to relax, and then you put it in the warmer and keep it at a temperature where it can kind of soak it back up, so that as soon as you slice it, all that juice is in every bite. But some people like to cook it a little differently. So I'll talk to the guys overnight that have their briskets in the warmer, while half the other guys at the event are still cooking. So some people will cook right up until the event starts. It just depends on your style.
So personally, where have you come? Since starting the show, cooking your own brisket, how have you seen the way that you do barbecue change?
As you know, you can only change one thing. So I'm still kind of changing one thing every time I cook. And I've gotten to the point where I think I'm at about 92 to 95%. So I've got a brisket that it wouldn't, if my friends come over, they'd be like, this is amazing. To me, there's still a few tweaks that I need to do, but it's definitely, I don't know how to cook 100 of them, but I can cook 2 or 3 and they'll come out pretty good.
For people that are looking to get into it, where do they start? Like what are you using to cook your brisket right now?
I have a 118 gallon.
That's a lot of gallons.
Yeah. Well, they call it a custom pit because it's not made out of anything. They literally just took an old pipe or something, and it's got flat sides, and it's got kind of an elbow, which is not exactly what you want. You want more of a curved exhaust pipe, and the chimney on it kind of goes out and then up. And so it's not the best, but it's what I've got. And the flow's not perfect. I might actually make the smokestack taller, which will make the smokestack draw more, which will draw the smoke in faster. There's just all these little tweaks that I'm doing.
You're even talking through like, well, this is what I'm going to upgrade on my pit. I love it, man. 2 questions I ask everybody at the end of the podcast. Why do you do what you do?
At first I did it because I just wanted people to hear how good it is and hear how hard these people are working. But now I've gotten to the point where I realize I can just do this. Like I can just travel around and I can make a living. You know, I used to sell real estate and made a lot of money doing that. But now, you know, you're kind of you're doing an interview with a new person every time you get a job, and it starts to get exhausting after a while. And like just people are, it's kind of like working a wedding. I don't know if you've done those, but I've shot a few weddings, and it's like the pressure's high. Like you got to get it done. It's got to be. And so in barbecue, it's just relaxed. I go and I set up my cameras and we talk. And if we screw it up, there's a lot of times where people will talk shit, or they want to put something negative into my show, and I just cut it out. And it's great because I'm the master. I'm the cutter. Like what goes in there and what comes out of my show is always going to be positive. It's always going to be supporting the cause. I have 10 interviews of people that just wanted to talk shit the whole time. And I sat there and I pretended like we were doing an interview, but 5 minutes in, I was like, no one's ever going to hear this. and it's great because I get to be the boss. I get to travel around. You know, I've been hired now by a couple guys to help them with their marketing. So they're also doing what I'm doing. So I just ride along with them. I'm probably going to end up going to Brazil and probably Italy, maybe France, just following them along while they open restaurants and consult with people. You know, some of these guys are getting paid thousands of dollars a day just to cook barbecue so someone else can watch.
Well, okay, so it makes me think of reading the reviews for your podcast. What sucks is whenever you go to read reviews, only like the negative ones stick out, you know? And there was one in there that said something about it's just like somebody prolonging, like a millennial prolonging his time before he has to get a real job, right?
I haven't read that one. I want to read that one.
I'm paraphrasing, right?
Yeah.
But to me, the whole concept of this podcast is passion and progress, right? You're pursuing something that you're passionate about, and then like you want to make money from it, you know?
For sure.
I don't think people realize how much time goes into producing a podcast.
For sure.
Again, it's like you're doing what you love, so it's like, is it work, is it play, or anything? Can you talk about what goes into the production of what you're doing? And because of your why, for me, like I only knew so much about barbecue before meeting you. And now after listening to X amount of your podcasts, there's so much more of the story that I'm involved with that I love this, because it's more like the, if you make your own peanut butter and jelly sandwich, right? It tastes so much better when you make your own, but I can't imagine a 12-hour peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like if it took me 12 hours to make that, I would enjoy the heck out of it. Talk to me about like the process and what people might find, what criticism you might get from just like, one, being enthusiast of barbecue and not actually owning your own, like, oh, I'm a barbecue joint type of thing. But I think, and I'm putting words in your mouth right now, from my perspective, is if you want to be successful at what you're doing, you're devoting your time to like going and getting other people's stories. If you were running your own barbecue pit, you'd need to spend these people were sleeping on mattresses, you know, in the place. So explain what that's like for you.
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is if you haven't cooked a peanut butter and jelly sandwich like a grilled cheese, you haven't lived yet. So I do that first. There's a few people on my show that have said this in so many ways, but my favorite quote is, when you go into a kitchen, when you see someone cooking, it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. Barbecue is magic. It's alchemy. Yeah. You've got this person who they don't have crazy equipment. I mean, the pit's probably expensive, but other than that, you know, they're probably using the cheapest knives. They're not doing anything crazy. They're turning wood and a spark into this thing that people will wait hours and hours in line for. People will fly. I've met more people in lines in barbecue from other countries than I have anywhere else. You'll meet from Romania to England. There was these Irish dudes at Snow's one day, waiting in that line. I used to call it my office hours because after a while, people know you're there. They've heard the show. They know you're there every Saturday, so they come see you. Mm-hmm. And usually that might be something that bothers people. To me, it's great.
Yeah.
And to the guys that say what'd you say, a millennial waiting to get prolonging?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. I'm free.
Exactly.
You interviewed Red Romina. She talks about like never gonna have a 9 to 5. Never.
Yep.
I'm never gonna have a 9 to 5, and I love it. Every day I look, like I'll be editing a video or I'll be drinking a Topo Chico and I'll look and I'm like, oh, it's 5:30, rush hour. Maybe I'll go for a bike ride. Mm-hmm. People think that you have to do this thing and you don't. You don't have to listen to your crappy boss. You don't have to like take abuse from your parents because you're not doing what they want. Like you can go out now. We live in a world that's magical. Like you can set up a few cameras and a microphone, and if the story's good or if you're passionate about it, people are probably going to watch. One of my favorite people is the Prehistoric channel on YouTube. He doesn't get a lot of views anymore, but he made this epic. He took the Jurassic Park soundtrack. It's like a 7-year-old kid took the Jurassic Park soundtrack and took a camera and a pterodactyl, and he's got these beautiful like landscapes he's made of dinosaurs and
like a claymation, like it's really small scale, right?
No, it's like, well, it's not tiny, but it's like probably as big as this table, but it's not even animated. It's literally just him holding the camera with the pterodactyl with the Jurassic Park music, and it got picked up on Reddit. Mm-hmm. And so he puts out these videos like, I don't know what's going on. I think my YouTube's broken. I'm at like 100,000 views. Like, you don't know. Mighty Joe Yim, the guy I was talking about in Houston, he just made a video years ago about him cooking on his pits. Now he can monetize it. He's got over 500,000 views that I saw last night. He's probably going to have 700,000 by the end of the week. Like, people want to see what you're doing. And every person who's sitting there at a job, like, your job might be interesting. If you want to make a show where you wear a ski mask and change your voice and just complain about your job, that might be a good show. Like, there's no limit to what you can create anymore. Like, you can literally, everyone's got it. You can do it with your cell phone.
Yep. And the reason I bring that up is because I feel like the same thing could be said for my podcast. Like, I'm just going around interviewing all these people, but for the most part, in the beginning, it was more about, all right, I need a system in place to get out and meet people. So that's why I do like my interviews in person. And then after a while, you're like, wow, the information in this is like, I'm getting a lot out of this. It's crazy. And once you start meeting other people, then that sparks your inspiration to go try something new or go do this other thing. And then it's just a whole snowball effect. And I find it much more fulfilling than what you were just describing, where you're like, you're at your normal job and everything. 'Cause each day you're accountable for yourself, and you also have to push, you're like, all right, what's the next episode next week? And it's just a completely revolving thing, but it's like, I don't know. I love it,
Yeah.
I just read that comment and I was like, they just don't get it,
But here's the other thing is that you and I will spend more time at a desk than they do in a week. Like, we will edit, we will work, we will do this stuff. We'll spend more time, but we'll be more happy about it because no one's going, hey, Mike, you got that report? Like, every once in a while, whether I'm traveling or something, I might not get a chance to put out, like last week, I didn't have an episode out because I was in 3 different places in 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I was just like, I'm just going to call this one a mulligan and I'll get back started this week. And like maybe 2 guys will say, hey, what's up, dude? There's no episode. What's going on? Like,
which is awesome, by the way.
Yeah. But it's like, it doesn't matter because you're the boss. One of my favorite photographers is Gary Winnow. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately he died a while ago, and he kind of missed this boom of cameras and all that stuff. But he was the guy. He takes street photography. If you look him up, I mean, he's just profound. He does all this Americana, and his pictures are incredible. But so he back in the day taught a class, and someone who was a blogger wrote about it, and he literally didn't know what to do because these people came in, and he doesn't know how to teach a class. He just knows how to take pictures. So he started telling dirty jokes and offending everybody. And this guy who was doing the blog was like, hey, why don't we go out and take pictures? Like, part of this class is like, you're going to show us. And he's like, okay. He proceeds to walk out the door. Everyone follows him. Everyone's kind of fudging with their cameras. In like 4 seconds, he opens his camera, loads film, shuts it, and starts walking. And so there's like 10 people chasing him down the street. He takes an entire roll of film in one block. stops, changes it, and everyone's trying to ask him questions, shuts it, takes off again. And so he's got this class chasing him. And this guy who wrote the blog stopped him. He's like, Gary, what's going on? Like, he's like, this is what I do. And he's like, this is amazing. But like, aren't you worried about missing stuff when you're changing film? And he's like, when I'm changing the film, there are no photos. and I think that's so profound. It's like, well, if the camera's not on, we're just not shooting. Like, there's a ton of times where I go and I'll have a conversation with someone just to have a conversation. You don't want to shove a camera in someone's face. You don't, like, we had coffee before we did this. You don't want to just put someone on the mic because they want to know that you're not going to screw them or try to get them, you know?
Yeah.
And even to this day, it's like, I wasn't really worried about it because I know your work, but every once in a while someone will say, hey, you want to come on my show? And I'm like, what are you gonna ask me? Like, you're gonna bring up my bad reviews?
The reason I wanted to talk about it was just because when you're pursuing something like what you're doing, I find, and I think there's enough proof in your podcast alone that if other people are listening to it and then they hear the little tidbits from other pitmasters and they're like, oh man, I never thought about doing that. It's like right there. Case in point. I think your product has so much value, and that's what I was like. I want to like curse here, but I'm not going to. I'll just say I don't like the haters,
but I love them. Like, I don't feel like I get enough feedback. So if you want to hate on my show, please. We used to read them when we would get the bad. I haven't even looked at iTunes in forever, but we used to read them. We used to happily read them because that person, there was one where the guy's like, I've listened to every episode and here's why they're all bad. And I was like, thank you. You've digested literally all of our content. Like, at that point, that's all we had. We live in a world where like everyone's afraid to be honest with each other. And I'm from New York, dude. Like, tell me to my face. I don't care. Let's go. I kind of want to know because I don't feel like most of us get enough feedback. You know, no one's told me my mustache is stupid, so I keep growing it. But maybe one day someone will.
All right. So last question, to get from, let's say, before you started your podcast to where you're at now, what advice would you give to, and it doesn't even have to be barbecue, because obviously this podcast has a smorgasbord of community of people, but most of them are creators or entrepreneurs in their own mind. And you have the proof. I want to say in the pudding, but is there something more barbecue related there? You have the proof in the brisket. I don't know, that you have been doing this for 100+ episodes. What kind of information or wisdom would you bestow on somebody that, if it's not a podcast, or YouTube or whatever, Instagram, they want to start creating and they want to be effective at it? What would you say?
I think Amanda said this on your podcast, which was just start. I mean, just when you have a deadline, when it's like you have to have something. I mean, some weeks I'm up at 2 a.m. Monday morning hitting publish. Some weeks I've scheduled it on Friday, or some weeks, this is like, I don't know why I don't do this more, because just thinking about it, like, I have like a wash of relaxation, but like some weeks I've got 3 episodes scheduled for 3 weeks.
No
where
way.
I'm just like, I don't have to publish a podcast for 3 weeks. Everything's set up and I can just go drink a mimosa and work on my video editing. But there's no limit to what you can do, and just start. I mean, you've got Javier here who kills it with just efficiency and all the videos on how to do everything. And, you know, I can't wait. I've got a list of questions for you to put out. So you were like, hey, if you guys want anything, I'll make videos. I'm like, let's go. I've been looking for you for a while, but you know, you can watch Gary V talk for 10 hours about how awesome life is and go get it. But at some point, I have this thing on my YouTube now where it tells me if I've been watching for an hour. It's like this little monkey pops up. I was like, just so you know, you told me to remind you that you've been watching. And I have to do it because I will watch someone else be awesome for way too long. And you have to realize, like, you can only watch for so long, and you just got to go out and be awesome. And you can make a living off Instagram stories, you know? There's no limit. You could be an expert on how filthy the sidewalks are in different cities. Like, you get me started.
Wow,
we could talk about.
I'm intrigued by that idea.
One of my friends, this reminds me of him because he's a very simple, like, he plays music and he works construction. He's not a high level guy in any way, but he always talks about how he looks down, and like, he'll go out to the bar and he'll make money because he just finds money on the ground. Like, he's got a different eye. So he just sees stuff on the ground. He sees, he's kind of like Theo Vaughn. I don't know if you've heard of him, the comedian.
I've worked with him
nice.
a couple times.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, Theo Vaughn, like he just comes out of left field with some joke about alligators or whatever. Like it's just nonsense, but his brain works that way.
I edited a video where he was dressed up as an alligator. That's really crazy that you said that, but anyhow.
Well, but he'll just say something and you're just like, how did you come up with that? Not to mention the two other things that came out of your mouth. Like whatever you think is boring about your life is incredibly interesting to other people. We are in just being born in America. You're basically in the top 1% of the world. So there are people out there that would love to see what your neighborhood looks like. Do you ride a bicycle to work? Do you commute? Are you pissed off the whole time? Like there's guys that they just eat food in their car. Like we have to stop worrying about what the story is and just start telling it, because everyone has a story. And I'm like, so I get caught up because I'll be like, I was just in New York City and it's like, I smile at people. I'm like, you're so interesting. Like, what's your story? And people are like, get the hell away from me, you weirdo.
Yeah. One more thing to dovetail off that with advice to people. Since you are such a good person at interacting with people, what would you give to somebody that's like an introvert and they want to approach a business to like interview them, like tell their story? Because obviously if you want to go out and do this kind of thing, you're going to be interacting with people,
Yeah.
What kind of advice would you give, especially because you run a podcast? Like it's a conversation,
Just listen. I honestly, there's a million ways to have the best question. I used to come to interviews with a page full of notes.
Me too.
And it's just like, that's all the distraction.
I agree.
If you can connect with the person across from you, if you can genuinely be interested in them, if you're not genuinely interested in people, then just don't make a show about that. Make a show about you. I mean, there's people that their whole Instagram or their whole YouTube is just them doing yoga, or them, it's very about them, and that's fine. Like that's what you want to show, that's what you show. But if you want to meet people, don't be like, take it in baby steps. Go make friends with the barista at your favorite coffee shop. The snows thing comes up in my mind a lot, which is like there's nothing more powerful than being a regular, because showing up means more than any email you could write, DM. I think you talked to Amanda also about this, like being in person is better than any funny joke or whatever. It's like Tinder works because people are afraid to talk to each other, but like going out and talking to 10 people is way more effective. And worst cases, you probably make a friend in the process, the idea that we're less connected now is funny to me, because I'm right now, like I put my phone on silent. I know that there's going to be 10 things waiting for me, or there's going to be stuff from, selfies I took yesterday or whatever, because we all want to know about each other. And once you find your people, it's a party. Like there's no limit to the people you can meet, to the fun you can have. And I was talking to you about this the other day. I don't care about, like, I'm not trying to be famous. I want to have enough access so that the people in the barbecue world let me hang out with everything they do. And that's all I need. I don't need everyone on the street to recognize me. I don't need to have I don't need my picture on a billboard. And I like that. I like that you can be awesome in a niche and no one knows who the hell you are. I love that, like, you don't need 1 million subscribers. You just need a few thousand that will interact with you. And it's cool to see. I pay attention, and I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and I pay attention to who's out there, because there are people that like never post and never do anything, and that's fine too. But I'm trying to find the people that are engaging, because those are the people that interest me, and those are the people that I know will kind of be more interesting for the show, or someone I can run into when I'm out. I love it. Like, people are like, hey, I'm going to be in Austin. I'm like, great, let's get barbecue. What's on your list? And it's cool because they don't think that I'm that accessible. And most people are. Mm-hmm. It's that easy. You just send a DM. Hey, I'm going to be in town. I'll buy you a slab of meat. Let's go.
It's a great sentence, by the way. Buy you a slab of meat. Let's go. Where can people find you?
On Instagram, I'm Best Barbecue, spelled out BARBECUE. And then Best BBQ Show on your favorite podcast app, any podcast app, and on YouTube.
One of your more recent ones, what would you, so just for somebody to get like a primer into what your content is?
I would say episode 106 is super good. That's the Goldies guys. It's a lot more relaxed. So there's a little bit of swearing, and we're all just kind of having fun after a long day of working. Besides that, I mean, it's really up to you. I have on my statistics for my podcast, I have like, it's either 1 to 5 minutes or like 100% of the episode. Yeah. So just find something you like, because a lot of people skip through, but once you find a conversation you like, Tootsie's a great one, 83-year-old Pitmaster. I've mostly covered Texas, and most of my listeners are from Texas or California. But if you're in Texas or California, I've probably covered at least one place you've been to. I'm about to put out some episodes from New York, and there's a new place opening there's actually a new place opening in New York, and a brewery that's probably going to have barbecue in the next 6 months in New York that I'm going to go cover. So there's always more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Hey, thank you.
This has been awesome. If you would like to share out this podcast, you can tag me at Javier Mercedes X. And is it the BBQ show or just Best BBQ Show?
Best BBQ Show. Best
BBQ Show. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this by this time, maybe you have already opened up your Instagram and followed him. It's a great, like, if you are into meat, there's no better Instagram account or show.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Can't wait to. I just like love hearing all the stories of the BBQ of the local places. So now I'm like, oh, I know these places for whenever family comes in, and I'm like, hey, we could go check out this one place, you know? So thank you so much. Till next time, live a life of abundance. I'll see you guys on the next episode.
Go eat some barbecue.
This concludes episode 55 of the Passion in Progress show. If you enjoyed what you heard, please leave me a review on iTunes. And if you would like to share this podcast out, you can tag me at Javier Mercedes X. That's Javier Mercedes X on any of the social platforms. Thank you for listening. And like I said before, live that life of abundance. Till next episode.